Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission here is pretty simple. We take a huge stack of sources, historical, scientific, you name it, and we boil it all down to the essential, surprising stuff. And today, we're doing a deep dive into a subject that has this incredible duality to it, the menstrual cycle.
It really does. I mean, on one hand, it's a completely precise, routine biological reality. It's a physiological function that is just, absolutely central to the human species continuing. But when you start pulling apart the research, you see how that reality has been consistently overshadowed. Across all of history, right up to today, it's tangled up in these powerful myths, rituals, and these really stubborn modern taboos.
That's the tension right there. The sources we've got today, from physiology to anthropology to media studies, they force you to ask a really basic question.
Yeah.
How can something so fundamental to life, to health, be so feared, so misunderstood, or just pushed to the margins by so many different cultures? That's the puzzle we're going to try and piece together today.
It's a total collision of the physical and the metaphysical. It's something that has shaped social structures just as much as it dictates what's happening inside the body. And to get the modern taboo, you really have to start where these stories began, way back in the anthropological record.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's step back, thousands of years and just look at the sheer weight of history here. It's so clear that long before anyone knew what a hormone was, societies everywhere were assigning this incredible meaning to the whole process. It wasn't just a physical thing.
Not at all. It was seen as this supernatural or intensely powerful force. And that power was interpreted across a huge spectrum. That's what makes the research so interesting. Our sources detail cultures that saw it as a, quote, dangerous flow that had to be controlled, sometimes with really strict isolation. And then right alongside that, you have cultures that basically worshipped it as a source of power and transformation.
So reverence on one side. The sources point to the Apache tribes, for instance. They didn't see a young woman's first cycle as something to be ashamed of. It was a powerful, necessary energy release. The rituals around it were all about harnessing that power for the good of the tribe.
Exactly. An active, positive transformation into womanhood. But then you have the other extreme, where the entire goal was restriction. Containment. If you look at the complex systems in some Northern California tribes, and the sources cover practices across 27 different groups, the reaction was just profoundly different.
How so? I mean, what kind of restrictions are we talking about?
Well, the young girl would be put into strict isolation, sometimes for days or even weeks. And this wasn't just, social distancing. It was ritual containment. She'd have restrictions on what she could eat. She was often forbidden from combing her hair or even touching her own body.
Wow.
Yeah, the idea was that her energy in that state was so powerful and untamed that it could disrupt the natural order of things.
And that idea, disruption, contamination, that feels like the most direct line to modern discomfort, right? It sets up this idea that this powerful female state is somehow incompatible with purity or order.
Absolutely. The beliefs about supernatural contamination were not abstract at all. They were very specific and often tied to the economy. The belief was that a menstruating woman could actively spoil vital goods just by being near them.
It's the details that are so wild. It's not just bad luck. It's a physical corruption.
Precisely. You see these ancient beliefs that she could ruin farmland by walking on it, or that she could turn a whole batch of milk sour instantly.
Just by her presence.
That's by her presence. It extended to things like honey, fish stocks. If the source of life can turn your food into poison, that's a power that demands control.
The detail that really stuck with me, because it shows how this belief spread into Europe, is a medieval tradition from southwest France. The local belief was that if a woman on her cycle even entered a wine cellar, her presence alone could cause the entire vat of wine to curdle. And that belief stuck around for centuries.
It did. And it shows this whole social infrastructure built around fear. But you can't ignore the other side. While a lot of the stories focus on fear, the fact that some cultures treated it with reverence, gave it a sanctified status, shows it wasn't universally seen as a negative.
And some societies even felt men needed to participate. The idea that this power was so strong that men tried to ritually incorporate it, that's fascinating.
It's a remarkable detail from the sources. We see this in some Australian tribes where men would perform a minor modification on the male organ. And the whole purpose, as anthropologists understand it, was to ritually take part in what they saw as a supernatural female social ritual. They saw the power in that cycle of shedding and renewal and felt they had to connect to it.
That just moves the whole story way beyond simple fear and isolation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It becomes about shared cosmic power.
It does. And if you synthesize this whole section, the key takeaway is this. Historically, the menstrual cycle was never just a physical event. It was a potent social tool. It shaped roles, rituals, and herbs, and ultimately, whether through fear or reverence, it defined a huge part of early human societies.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly. So the ancients saw this incredible, almost dangerous power in the mystery of it all. But it really wasn't until, what, the mid-20th century
Yeah.
that we finally cracked the code of what that hormonal engine actually is. So let's pivot from myth to mechanism. Let's unpack the biology.
Right. The biological process is one of just astonishing precision and coordination. It's all orchestrated by hormones, and it kicks off when the pituitary gland gets a signal from the brain and starts releasing these key hormones that travel down to the ovaries. That's the starting gun.
And once the ovaries get that signal, the first big thing is getting an egg ready to go.
Exactly. The pituitary releases follicle-stimulating hormone, or FSH, and its job is pretty clear. It stimulates the growth of several follicles in the ovaries, and each one has an immature egg inside. As those follicles grow, they start producing another hormone, estrogen.
And estrogen is kind of the great architect here, isn't it? It's not just about the egg, it's preparing the entire environment.
Precisely. Estrogen has two main jobs at this point. First, it helps one follicle become dominant. But second, and this is crucial, it tells the uterus to start building up its inner lining, the endometrium. This is a huge preparation. The uterus builds up this thick, blood-rich vascular lining. It's essentially building a fortress, just in case a fertilized egg arrives. A massive biological investment.
Which brings us to ovulation. What's the final trigger that releases the egg?
So when estrogen levels hit their peak, the pituitary responds with this huge, brief surge of another hormone, luteinizing hormone, or LH. That LH surge is the trigger. It makes the dominant follicle burst and release the mature egg.
And then the body immediately shifts gears again, right? Into a waiting game to see if fertilization happens.
That's the luteal phase. The empty follicle transforms into something called the corpus luteum, and that little structure becomes the new hormonal engine. It starts pumping out progesterone. Progesterone's whole job is to maintain that thick endometrial lining. It keeps the fortress strong and healthy, ready for an implantation.
But if fertilization doesn't happen, what happens to that massive, energy-intensive fortress the body just built?
Well, without the signal from a fertilized egg, the corpus luteum starts to break down. And when that happens, the hormone levels, especially progesterone, they just crash. When progesterone drops, that's the signal. The fortress isn't needed anymore. The body stops all maintenance.
And that hormone crash is what triggers the physical event of menstruation.
Yes. Without that hormonal support, the whole network of blood vessels and tissue in the lining starts to break down. The uterus begins to contract, which is where cramps come from, to expel that entire unneeded lining. The discharge itself is, blood, tissue, and mucus. It's the body cleaning house and resetting the clock for the next cycle.
And that whole process takes about a week, and it happens roughly 12 times a year, though the sources are clear that it varies a lot. We always hear this connection to the lunar cycle, right? About 29 days. Is there actually a link there, or is that just a coincidence?
The sources are really interesting on this. While the average cycle length does align very closely with the lunar period, modern science can't definitively prove a causal link. In fact, the source mentions that the statistical probability of it being a coincidence is so huge, something like 160 million times 160 million, that it's still this kind of unresolved biological mystery. We just don't know for sure.
And this whole hormonal roller coaster just keeps going until a woman reaches menopause, and the cycle stops for good.
Yeah.
So that's the physical reality. Organized, precise, and absolutely vital.
So here's the final turn in our deep dive. We have this incredibly precise scientific understanding now. We know the hormones, we know the functions. So why does the subject stay so profoundly awkward, so taboo in so many modern places?
It's a classic case of cultural lag. The scientific knowledge just hasn't been able to completely erase thousands of years of narrative. Even with a clear biological understanding, that historical perception of the slow as unclean or something to be hidden, it just persists. Our sources show this is really common in places like Northern Europe and parts of Asia. The discomfort level is still high.
And the media, which you'd think would be a force for normalizing it, often seems to reinforce the old story by sanitizing everything. You just have to look at the advertising.
Right. There's this fundamental paradox in how the products are marketed. You're selling something for millions of women, but the ads often seem designed to manage the discomfort of a male viewer. And the most obvious example of that is the whole blue liquid thing, the complete avoidance of the color red. Instead of reality, we get these These weird, sterile substitutions.
Think back to the first section. The historical fear was contamination, that this blood-spoiled milk or curdled wine. By replacing the visual of blood with this sterile, almost medical-looking blue liquid, the media is basically subconsciously catering to that ancient fear.
It's sending a message.
It is. It's saying, don't worry, this isn't that scary, powerful thing from history. It's just clean, anonymous blue science.
The message is, we have to hide the reality of this.
Yeah.
And that just keeps the cycle of discomfort going.
And it has real-world effects. A 2010 report in our sources points out that the topic still causes huge fear and confusion among young girls all over the world because they just aren't getting clear, direct information.
We are seeing some efforts to normalize it, thankfully. Companies and countries are trying to treat the cycle as a normal, healthy event and reduce the stigma, but it's clearly an ongoing battle.
Which brings us back to that core collision. This thing is often treated as shameful, but the biological fact is, this is the only time the human body loses blood without trauma or injury. It is, in fact, the very foundation for the continuation of our species. The science screams potential and health, but the cultural story often whispers fear and impurity.
And that wraps up our deep dive. We've gone from these complex rituals where girls couldn't even comb their hair and fears about curdled wine, all the way to the precise mechanics of the pituitary gland and the vascular endometrium.
What this journey really shows is how a clear, predictable biological reality is constantly colliding with and being shaped by cultural stories. The menstrual cycle is literally the basis of life, the ultimate sign of health, yet society, driven by these ancient fears, so often tries to hide it away.
The knowledge is there. The science is settled. This blood is the ultimate sign of potential life, not injury. So here's your final thought to take with you. Given everything we now know, what assumptions are you still holding, or what taboos are you maybe reinforcing that are based on thousand-year-old fears about spoiled wine, rather than the simple life-sustaining science we understand today? That's something to mull over until our next deep dive.